Welcome back to my channel Conquer the Fear. In this video, we are going to look at the very popular @controller and the @rest controller annotations. What exactly are they? What is the difference between them? Why the controller is used along with the @response body? How you can use them in your project? What is the preferred or the better way? And the reason behind introduction of @controller. You happen to be a junior, mid-level, or an experienced professional looking for a quick last-minute interview guide, or you want to learn the difference between them, you have landed on the right video. Spring being one of the most powerful frameworks that is going to simplify your development, whether you are developing a web application or you are designing a RESTful API in Java. Spring Boot, at the very core, it is going to take the advantage of different annotations. Of these two annotations are such where it is going to take the advantage and develop the applications. In general, the application flows from different layers. So the client requests something, then exactly it lands on the controller of your web application. Then ultimately it goes to the different layer, that is service, and then the repository. Ultimately, after it returns the data, it is going to return back to the client. There's two fundamental annotations that are used in the controller level. So whether it is @controller or @rest controller, they are both used for handling the incoming HTTP request so that they can be used to serve that particular response. To understand the in-depth of these two annotations, let's take an example of a traditional website or an application. Now, in the traditional application, there were different key components. The first used to be the dispatcher servlet, where it used to be acting as a front controller, where it used to handle all the incoming requests. Then it used to come the handler mapping, which used to map the incoming request to the appropriate controller methods. And then at the end, the controller is going to process that particular request. It is going to prepare the model data, and it is going to select the view where it has to return that particular data. Now in that model and the view, it is to contain the model as well as the logical view of that particular name. At the end, the view resolver used to resolve that particular logical name to the actual view for the implementation purpose. Now at the end, the view used to render that particular model to the client. So that's how it used to work in the traditional web application. Now let's look at the very first annotation, that is @controller. Now the primary purpose was to be used in the Spring MVC application, where you can handle the incoming web request. Now the return type, it was supposed to be the view name. Now when the controller served the request and then it used to return that particular response, it used to give the HTML page name, that let's say example like in an index.html, or any of this particular view resolver is to resolve to HTML. Now all the methods which are there in the controller was expected to return some view name. Now it is going to be the string representation either to the HTML page, that is going to be the, let's say an example, index.html, or either it is to be like any of this particular like JSP thymeleaf page. So it used to give that particular view name. Take a look at controller. It was available since 2.5 version of the Spring framework. Now when you are building a traditional server side render web application, this used to be responsible for generating the complete HTML response over there. Take an example of a sample program. You see @controller is written over here. Now you see @request mapping, and then you will see there is a method written over there. But if you see the return type, it is going to be the name of that particular HTML file, or any of this particular thymeleaf or JSP page. So it used to return the view name over here. As that particular simple annotation of @controller along with the request mapping was giving then rendering the web page name, now we wanted something in the controller to return as an JSON or an XML or a plain text. Now instead of returning the view name, we wanted the JSON or an XML. Then that's the reason @response body annotation was used. So along with the combination of @controller, if you wanted that particular method to return a response, either JSON or an XML or a plain text, instead of that particular simple view name, you must have to explicitly write this at the rate response body on that particular specific method. So internally, this annotation is going to tell the Spring to skip the view resolution process. Instead, it is going to return some value which is going to directly return the HTTP response body over here. Common use case are like whenever you are building a RESTful API and the controller is an older version, or you have a single controller which need to serve both the traditional view and the API endpoints. In that case, we used to use this particular at the rate response body and at the rate controller along with a combination. To take a look at this, the example here at the rate controller, if you see, I have written the different methods over here. Now if you see, it is the very first thing, it is going to return the view name. But if you take the example of the second one, along with that request mapping at the rate response body, it is going to indicate that this particular method is not going to return a view, it is going to return some data. Now if you see, it is going to return some JSON, like JSON or an XML as a response over here. Now let us discuss about our hero, that is at the rate REST controller annotation. Now it was introduced to simplify the RESTful development of the web services in your Spring application. So it was quite convenience with this particular annotation because it was the combination of at the rate controller and at the rate response body. Now it is going to be implicitly handle this at the rate response body. So I will take an example and show you how internally this is going to work. So when a class is annotated with the at the rate rest controller, all the method within that particular class are implicitly inheriting the at the rate response body. Now what does that mean? You don't need to add that at the rate response body to each of these particular methods, and so that it should return the HTTP response body. Now this annotation is available from Spring Framework 4 onwards. Now whenever you are trying to build a modern REST API along with the Spring Boot, where the front end needed the JSON or an XML data from the backend, then you used to use this particular annotation, that is at the rate REST controller. Let us discuss about why this particular annotation was introduced. Now before REST controller, if the Spring Boot application, say let's say there had 20 APIs endpoints written in your controller, now on each of this particular method you have to write that at the rate response body, which was kind of repetitive, which was lot of confusing, and then also it was not suggested well as well. So that's the reason, in order to avoid this repetition, the at the rate rest controller were introduced. So it is going to handle all these particular methods, which is going to return directly the response body over here. Now if you take an example of at the rate rest controller as an example, you see at the rate rest controller, if you see here along with that request mapping, and then you will see a class written over here, then you have the specific request mapping method written over here. Now you see this is going to return the converted to a JSON automatically because we have annotated with the at the rate controller. Now this particular at the rate controller, you can consider it as an a combination of at the rate controller plus at the rate response body. I hope I was able to explain you the annotations, what is the difference between them, where to use them and when to use them. If this video was helpful, please give a thumbs up on this video. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell icon. Thank you for watching.